Kia ora, welcome to episode 53 of the SWNZ Podcast, the podcast for New Zealand Star Wars fans. My name is Matt.
And my name is Christy.
As you've probably noticed, today is Wednesday. We normally release the podcast on Tuesdays, and we'll be getting back to that schedule from next week. It was another great week for news from a galaxy far, far away, so let's jump in and talk Star Wars. Some good news and some bad news to discuss this week. I'd like to really sort of focus and emphasize on the good news, but we will be hitting on a few slightly sour notes, I think, but it is worth discussing and just being aware of everything that's going on in terms of Star Wars. First up, last week we talked about a couple of TV spots, short videos for the Book of Boba Fett. A bit of information that came out around that time that we did not mention last week that wasn't very clear, but it's confirmed from official sources, is that the Book of Boba Fett series will be 7 episodes in duration. So starting at the end of December, the 29th of December, it will run through January and into the middle of February only. So worth knowing that in mind, so we don't sort of anticipate an 8 or longer series and get disappointed when it's suddenly truncated. 7 episodes for the Book of Boba Fett. Big news, big local news in terms of sci-fi and pop culture conventions. Auckland Armageddon has sadly been cancelled. It was due to take place in a couple of weekends on the 17th, 18th, 19th of December, but due to just the unpredictability of the COVID situation and the traffic light system and how many people they could guarantee were going to be able to attend, complications with getting people through the door with vaccine passes and so forth, I guess there was just a little bit of uncertainty both in terms of vendors needed to do to prepare for that well in advance and what they could do on the fly depending on whether or not this was definitely going ahead or not. So they made the hard decision to cancel. Again, like I say, a hard decision to make, but I think probably just the best one to make at this point for both attendees and the vendors and the organisers. A shame, they put a lot of work into this. This was going to be their 100th Expo, their 100th Armageddon convention, which is kind of a big deal. And what this means is that the next Armageddon convention, the first one for 2022, which will be the Tauranga Armageddon Convention, or Bay of Geddon as it is sometimes called, taking place on February the 26th and 27th, will in fact be the 100th Armageddon Expo. We'll be following that with 5 events in total for 2022, with Christchurch taking place in March, Wellington shortly thereafter, early April, Palmerston North in August, and Auckland at the usual Labour weekend in October, 21st to 24th of October in 2022. So we look forward to that event returning to Auckland next year.
Obviously, this is a bit sad. There's always a good Star Wars flavour at Auckland Armageddon, even in this modern era where we don't have very many celebrity guests. There's always still a lot of fans, a lot of merchandise and things to check out. So this is a little sad, but although personally it's not wholly unexpected. I was hoping it would go ahead, but I had my doubts just with the complexities. It just seemed a little too soon, and obviously there's only so much you can keep cancelling and bumping it out before it just starts getting messy. So it feels good, I think, to just have sort of the matter settled than sort of being up in the air. A lot of people travel from around the country, particularly cosplayers, for the competition and things like that. So this just makes it nice and easy for everyone. You're not worrying about last minute changes or cancellations at the last minute. So definitely looking forward to the roundup of events for next year.
So on the topic of cancellations, let's get the other bad news out of the way. The HasLab Rancor project did not meet its funding targets yesterday. It had a target of 9,000 in order to be backed and to go ahead. This is the Black Series Rancor. We've talked about it many times, and I'm sure you're all completely aware of what we're talking about here. Did not hit its 9,000 target, so will not go ahead. And we've talked about many of the reasons why we think this was progressing slowly in previous podcasts, and it really seems like the conversations we're seeing online are fully aligned with that. Everybody had very similar thoughts in terms of the price point, the number needed for the initial backing, which was higher than the Razor Crest, the number needed for all the subsequent tiers, the actual products that were being released as pack-ins, as bonus pack-ins for the additional tiers. All of those things just kind of fell short compared to expectations. And, cumulatively, it came very close. If it had passed the 9,000 target, we would have had it manufactured, but without any of the bonus pack-in features, which in some ways is a worse outcome than it not going ahead at all, because you end up paying the same amount, but getting less than what potentially could have. Just by comparison, it's interesting to note that the Razor Crest had an initial target of 6,000, only 6,000 rather than the 9,000 of the Rancor. If the Rancor had been set to be produced at that level, if that target was achieved, it would have been produced in probably another tier on top of that. And because of the way fear of missing out works, if people had seen it breach that first target, it probably would have just snowballed beyond that. The Razor Crest got a total of over 28,000 backers, which is just huge compared to what this Rancor got. So yeah, a number of conversations we've had along the way, and I think we all sort of understand why this probably failed. It came very, very close. The other thing that probably contributed, or almost certainly contributed, was a number of other HasLab projects running at the same time, with fans of Star Wars being also often fans of other franchises like G.I. Joe and Ghostbusters, both of which had HasLab projects, which would just cannibalise some of the budget available to fund this Rancor. The G.I. Joe Sky Striker and the Ghostbusters Proton Pack, by comparison, also were both funded.
I've seen some people say that as well as the price point and at the same time as the other three, they did this in that overlap between the Thanksgiving, Black Friday sort of shopping and the lead up to Christmas. Now that is where people don't really want to be dealing with big out of the blue expenses. Christmas, we all want to shower our loved ones with extra gifts. The sort of family getting together means bigger meals, sort of buying extra for that. And then, of course, wanting to grab any particular essentials or things you've had your eye on for a while during the Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales. And then going and putting 3 high-tier, essentially, toys out there for people to fund at this point in time.
Yeah, well, the thing is, here in New Zealand, if we bought it through EB Games, we'd have to put down a $100 deposit. But if you buy it direct from Hasbro, you don't pay it at the point you order it, but when the funding closes, they take the whole amount out of your credit card at that point in time. So people would have been having a big chunk of cash taken out of their wallet on the 7th of December and not actually seeing anything for it for over a year. This was due for release in 2023. So yeah, difficult timing to encourage people to do that. And I think the numbers just tell the story. 28,000 backers for the Razor Crest, 8,500 backers for the Rancor.
Yeah, I think obviously the fan perception and backlash, I mean, we kept watching the numbers drop after they released those tiers. And I think people would appreciate at this high price point level some sort of payment plan. I think there's a lot of people that would love this sort of thing in their collection, but it's at the Sideshow collectibles level. And Sideshow, depending on the price point, will let you break purchases down between 3 up to about 6 or 7, monthly payments and things like that. And I'm like, if you're asking the average collector to spend that much all at once on a date that you cannot predetermine, it's going to hit on that day of the month, regardless of when your paycheck comes in, when your rent goes out, that's just a big hit for a lot of people.
Yeah. So we also talked about, or wondered in previous podcasts, what sort of impact this might have on future HasLab projects. That question is not answered. There is an official statement from HasLab. I'll read it now. The Star Wars The Black Series Rancor HasLab didn't reach its minimum backing goal. We thank the fans who showed their support and backed this project and those who shared their passions throughout the campaign. We look forward to bringing you more dream concepts in the future. So, obviously, they don't want to completely pull the plug on Star Wars HasLab projects, but I think this is going to just result in a lot more caution, perhaps a little bit more introspection and market analysis and for future projects, and then maybe a little bit more delay as that's implemented.
I see a common thread in the comments since this has sort of been formally announced that it didn't reach completion, is that people felt like Hasbro wasn't really listening to fans. They didn't really sort of know what the fans wanted or didn't care what the fans wanted. And I think I would love to see them put out a survey so people can feel like they can get their thoughts across. Put out a survey. Why didn't you back it? What did you think about the price point? Do all this kind of sort of market research as it was. So the next time they come up with something, it's going to be a little bit more on target, more aligned. I think people just felt like this kind of took advantage of them. It was a high price point. It didn't have the things that they wanted. It sort of felt like they just assumed that there would be, 20-odd thousand people that were going to open their wallets and pay for this, no questions asked. But I think events like Celebration put out surveys, how do you think we did? What was your view of like the vendors, the panels, the queues, all of that sort of stuff, so that they can find out if there were any points that they didn't personally see from their thing, but the fans really noticed, and what can they do in the future. And I think when you're doing something that's a big community event, you need to have the community on board with a positive sentiment behind it, because that builds that kind of positive, and everybody wants to be on board. Everyone wants to be part of it and doesn't want to miss out, because these projects won't get made again. They're only going to make 28,000 Razor Crests, and they're not going to re-release it in the future. It's not going to be sitting on store shelves at Walmart and stuff like that. So people have to join in now. And
when it comes to survey analysis, it's not always necessarily just going with the clear-cut majority necessarily, but it is just ensuring that you will have adequate market for the product you're talking about. Because clearly when it comes to Hasbro, there's a split, fans are split between whether or not they focus on 3.75 or 6-inch. And, we can argue the merits of both of those. We're fans of both series of those. We've got an entire room full, wall-to-wall of just 3.75-inch figures going back for decades, but we've been really getting stuck into buying the Black Series just because there's some really cool stuff coming out of that. But if you do a survey, one of those groups, one of those camps will nudge the other one out. It doesn't necessarily mean you should always go singularly just for one over the other, but you should get a little bit of information if you're targeting Black Series versus Vintage Collection. You should get a little bit of information from the fans as to what they actually want. And we did touch on this before, and I have seen it reflected in the comments, this notion of diorama building, how you're going to display your actual products, and what that means for the actual sort of product type.
We know that from the sort of tie-in, the bonus additions that they include with these projects, that some people want the bonus ones to open and use as part of the dioramas, and some want to keep them carded because of their very, very unique, hard to get nature. So if you're not even impressed with the product itself, you're not even there was less of a sentiment to buy it once, let alone twice. We can only imagine what percentage of Razor Crests were purchased for the carded figures that are going to come with this, because that through ever in the future, that's going to be an easy sell. Either the figures alone, or you sell the Razor Crest alone and keep the figures for yourself, sell the whole thing in the future. I mean, The Mandalorian was hugely popular, and there hasn't been the huge 3.75-inch merchandise range for it, compared to even Funko has done a ton of stuff. We've got blurgs and banthas and all sorts of bits and pieces from Funko, and you don't really make scenes with Funko, not to the same extent that you would with standard action figures. So yeah, it's obviously sad that this didn't get made. I guess we'll have to wait and see. It could be a long time before we find out what the next project might be. So
still talking about Hasbro a little bit here. Obviously, a few people are a bit bitter, and I understandably, at Hasbro just at this point in time, either because it felt obvious as to why this was going to fail. It was a project they really wanted to back and really wanted to get their hands on, and now they can't. So there's a number of different reasons to feel a little bit underwhelmed by the experience. But just putting that aside for a moment, there's something interesting coming up. And when we talk about product announcements and bring home the bounty later, there is some good Hasbro news coming out, some stuff that we're actually personally quite impressed with. And related to that, we've talked about the Disney Insider program on Disney+, which is a little bit hidden, a little bit buried, and you may not be aware of it, but it does have some Star Wars content. A few episodes back, I can't remember the exact number, they actually took a look at the High Republic series and talked to some of the authors of that content. It's been on a little bit of a hiatus, but episode 9 came out last week, and episodes 10 to 14 are going to come out this Wednesday, i.e. today, and next Wednesday. And StarWars.com is promoting the fact that the upcoming episode 10, which we believe and hope will be out tonight, is going to be going behind the scenes on how Star Wars Black Series figures are made. And in particular, they're going to be looking at the just announced and soon to be available, we hope, Boba Fett and Fennec Shand action figures from the Book of Boba Fett. They're referred to as throne room variants of these characters. So, Disney Insider is a hidden documentary on Disney Plus in some ways. It's not really shown up under the Star Wars tag because it's not Star Wars content, They are going to be taking a look at Star Wars action figures in a about-to-be-released episode, and I'm kind of looking forward to that, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail next week. Two more bits of news on the, I guess, negative side of the scale, just a little bit. Not really wanting this podcast to be dwelling on negative Star Wars news, but we do need to be aware of everything that's going on around the universe. The Galactic Starcruiser, the hotel experience, which we've talked about again in many podcasts. Last week we talked about a early look video that premiered on the Disney Parks channel. In fact, it premiered as part of a larger program offering, and the excerpt was shown on the Disney Parks channel. We thought it was kind of an interesting move to overhype it to the level they did when they weren't really showing us stuff that was particularly exciting or revealing in terms of what the hotel looked like on the inside. And what we did see was a little bit underwhelming in terms of surface decor and the way that sort of were trying to make it look in world. It was a little bit underwhelming, and that stood in stark contrast in particular to the way the actor and the Disney Parks staff member were overhyping the experience, and it felt quite fake, frankly, as well as being cheesy and a little bit contrasty. That video has been pulled because of just the sort of straight up 100% outright negative response it was getting. Everyone agreed that overhyping it to that level when it really wasn't showing off anything particularly interesting was just a sort of weird marketing tactic. And one thing I think I noticed looking at some other people's reactions online is that jump to pulling it wasn't in fact just a singular move. Last week I think we talked about the fact that the actor, Sean from the Goldbergs, he was so hyped the whole time that even when it was mentioned that they were about to leave, he said, "Oh, great, I can't wait," sort of thing. He couldn't dial back his overacting, even to the point where it looked like he was excited to be leaving the hotel. I think there was a version of the video where that was clipped out, because when you upload videos on YouTube, obviously you can't replace them, but you can clip content out as a way of getting rid of copyrighted content or content that's otherwise you've decided doesn't need to be online. So there were actually two versions of this video before it was fully pulled. But it is gone now. All mention of it on Twitter and other social media is gone now. So I think somebody somewhere in marketing has realised that they made quite a misstep in terms of trying to portray the Galactic Starcruiser in that way.
It'll be interesting to see if they realise that it was just the tone of the video or literally what was at the hotel that people were upset about. There have been a lot of the Disney park YouTubers sort of analysing the reaction to this video, what was shown in the video. One in particular did sort of a comparison about what we saw in the video versus the comparison art that was given out. And it was a massive difference. The concept art of the bridge looks nothing like what they've given us. Consoles are completely different. The colors, the screens, it doesn't look anything the same. The hallways are a massive, massive difference. The hallways had sort of curved corners and things with all this amazing detail. And then in this video, it looked almost dead flat with a bit just these tiny sort of stripes down the thing. Corridor, it was a plain white ceiling. It looked like it had either completely flat carpet or flooring. It was really telling how different it was to the concept art. We haven't seen the atrium where it looks like you kind of check in and the restaurant. Those are the two main areas that we haven't seen. But by judging by the contrast between the concept art and things like the lightsaber training and the bridge, those are going to look drastically different to what we're seeing in these videos. So it'll be interesting to see if we get sort of like a rehashed trailer for this to try and sort of spin it in a different way that fans will sort of respond better to it. I mean, because they're already taking a lot of money from fans booking for this experience. I don't think they can go and like change the actual hotel much in the few months until this hotel sort of fully properly opens in March next year. It's taken them a long time to build it. I don't think they can do much beyond what they already have. And we know that there's been a bit of criticism with the new sort of Disney park leadership, that they're sort of cutting corners a few ways, trying to sort of, as they would say, nickel and dime people by making them pay for sort of extras and not really getting the full experience.
And there seems to even be a little bit of that upselling required as part of the Galactic Starcruiser experience, which you kind of don't really think should be in place for something that is a base price that is expensive as this is. Once you've paid the base price, you should just all get the same superb experience. But there is an implication that even once you've paid that base price, for instance, when in the dining hall, you're sharing a table with other people unless you pay an additional upsell price to sit at the captain's table, for instance.
Yeah, and that's not everyone there is going to be able to do that. There's only so many spaces. And they have already released a whole sort of articles and photos detailing all the merchandise that you can buy at this experience. I'm like, people haven't even gotten there yet. And they're already trying to get you to buy jewelry and t-shirts and full-on costumes so that you can walk around dressed as characters and aliens and things like that. And I'm like, oh, it's going to be a bit of a hard sell when people have already put that much money into their holiday to go, oh, now don't wear any of the clothes you bought, come and buy all the costumes so that you can get the best experience. I'm like, it should be the best experience you can have straight out of the gate, give people a generic Jedi robe or, something like as in your room, like as instead of like forcing all this upselling. So
regardless of what you think about what it looks like, this video is clearly a marketing misstep. Beyond that, we're trying to reserve judgment just a little bit until we see some actual real world experiences. I did see a few other YouTubers trying to take a similar perspective, and their point of view was that this may not be everything we've seen so far. But having said that, we have seen a full-on itinerary for the not even quite 2 days that you were there. And that itinerary is pretty detailed down to the fraction of an hour. And I think we have seen just about everything, or at least know what to expect. There isn't going to be any massive bonus or additional experience or layer or chapter to this that we're actually not aware of yet.
No, there's only so much you can fit into what is essentially 2 days. You check in on one day, you do a couple of things, you have the whole next day, and then on what would be the third day, you're checking out in the morning. So you really only get sort of like a day and a half. And a chunk of that is an excursion to Galaxy's Edge, which you get to for a lot less than $6,000. So a chunk of your incredibly expensive hotel stay is not in the hotel. So it'll be really interesting to see what the fans really think in person when they get to experience it and see everything. Obviously, for us here in New Zealand, that's not really going to be too much of an option for us in March next year. So we'll be looking to see how authentic and fun it is for the fans that paid for the full experience.
All right, there's one more little news bite before we move on from the news roundup section to talk about product announcements and local store reports, and that is that the Star Wars The Old Republic 7.0 update entitled Legacy of the Sith that we were expecting in less than a couple of weeks now has actually been postponed for 2 months in order to make sure that the subscribers get the best experience out of this expansion. It is a big deal, this expansion, the 7.0 expansion, because it is coming with a lot of user interface and user experience changes to the combat system, changes to the UI and so forth, and all up that is being delayed until February the 15th, so we've got a couple more months to wait for that to come out. Sad in some ways it's going to be delayed, but if it means we get the right product, I'm okay with that.
Speaking of video games, if you like to play Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, the continuation of the lead up to the epic Starkiller event coming up very soon, we have now got the full array of the 4 characters that will be released as marquee events leading up to the Starkiller event. So first we had Dash Rendar, followed by Kyle Katarn. Next up, sort of from left field, unexpected for a lot of fans, they added Darth Talon. And then fourth and finally, we have Mara Jade. So this is a really exciting sort of mix of legacy characters. They kind of teased that these would be characters from the older legacy era. So we have things from comic books, from video games, from novels. And so this is a really fun way of sort of adding some of those older characters that aren't in the current sort of timeline, but fans still really love. And so we've got them now added to the game. The current event is Darth Talon. Mara Jade will be coming up very shortly. The developers have revealed her kit, her abilities and things like that. She looks like she'll be very fun, and they're teasing the Starkiller event that's coming up in about a week or two away. So that's really exciting. I'm looking forward to that. These characters are free to play. If you want to play the Starkiller event, you're going to have to spend a bit to gear up these new characters straight away. But in the future, Starkiller himself will even be available for free-to-play players. So if you like Star Wars app games, you're looking for something to check out, it's definitely worth jumping in and enjoying this event.
I think that's really interesting news. Even if you don't play Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes or intend to play it, this notion that they're using these deep legacy characters, Dash Rendar, Kyle Katarn, Mara Jade, and Darth Talon, the notion that they're using those characters in modern content, I find fascinating and kind of, it's exciting and interesting to see them given that new lease on life. And I can actually see that it would encourage people, entice people to go back and take a look at some of the content that these characters originate in.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, we've seen some of the older LucasArts era video games being re-released, like for the Switch and stuff like that. Then we're getting the whole remake of KOTOR. It's kind of like Disney's finally relaxing a little bit and bringing out some of the really older classic Star Wars content that doesn't exactly fit in with the new canon timeline, but fans still really love regardless. And it's all just Star Wars. Yeah. So it's really fun to see this kind of new era where we're getting to enjoy some of the stuff, re-releasing the books, republishing them so people can go back and still read these great stories, kind of honoring the contribution to the incredible sort of galaxy of Star Wars content from all the authors that came before and really built up the fan base by giving all this extra content on top of the small number of movies back in the 80s and 90s. So it's really fun to see those beloved characters and storylines kind of getting pulled into modern games. And I just love having these characters in my collection.
And to be honest, I think it was probably the right way to do it when Disney took over and was establishing this concept of new canon out of necessity. I agree with the move on the whole. It would have really clouded the matter and clouded the interpretation if they tried to start and define new canon in parallel with supporting old canon, i.e. now legacy. But having just given us time to accept and get used to new canon and the way it's going to pan out and what it means for the entire timeline and continuity, being able to reference and enjoy and go back to the old legacy material, I think it's working out really well. Okay, let's move on to look at new product announcements and local store reports. This week was week 9 for the Bring Home the Bounty campaign, and there were some very cool Hasbro products revealed for this. In particular, there are a couple of Black Series 6-inch figures, a deluxe Boba Fett throne room version, removable helmet showing Temuera Morrison, and Fennec Shan. I'm very excited about those two Book of Boba Fett characters, and I believe they're going to be the characters that are featured in that Disney Insider episode that we talked about just a few moments back. Also just announced from Hasbro 3 Vintage Collection Deluxe box sets in the 3.75-inch scale. These are quite out of the blue and they're all Mandalorian focused, but I think they're quite desirable. I personally really quite want these. We're not sure when or where they will be available, but I anticipate that we'll be able to see them one way or another here locally in New Zealand. The deluxe box sets, 3 of them. The first one has Ahsoka plus Grogu plus a Morai, the little owl-like bird, which can actually sit on Ahsoka's arm in this pack, in this configuration for the figure. There is an incinerator trooper with Grogu and a lot of flame effects, including a sort of big splash force field shield version of the flames hitting Grogu using a force shield. And finally, there is a Navarro stormtrooper with an E-Web cannon. I frankly want all 3 of these deluxe sets to actually be able to use the figures in dioramas.
Obviously, we are big 3.75-inch figure collectors. There has been more of a focus on the 6-inch Black Series line for the Mandalorian figures and things like that. So I'm very excited to see them giving us quite a fair amount of figures all at once with some really cool additions. The flame effects, the cannon, these kind of really help you create dioramas on your shelf with these figures. But also the box art for these figures looks really cool as well. So they're the sort of thing where it's like you're going to want to be carefully opening them to preserve the box art. It's got that great vintage vibe with some cool art across the front of it. And then the figures themselves are going to be a great addition, particularly if you've got the Razor Crest and are looking to create a really big sort of 4-inch scale Mandalorian setup on your shelf. These are going to be great additions.
Yeah, they're not blister carded, they're not window boxed, so you're going to have to open these, which is fine with us. Some new products from the Vision series on Disney Plus from Bandai in the SH Figuarts line. There is what they're describing as highly posable sculpts of the two twins, Kare and Am. These look really quite impressive. There's been some other versions of these in non-posable statues, but it's interesting to see that we're actually getting in the SH Figuarts scale posable versions of those two figures. There's also from Funko a pop version of the Ronin, but I'll talk about that shortly when we get down to the Funko section of our product announcements. And from Kotobukiya, I quite like this. It's for a few reasons. There is a Lucasfilm 50th anniversary Yoda fountain statue. So this is representing the Yoda fountain that is outside Lucasfilm in San Francisco, which would be quite a nice display piece in its own right. Not clear if we're going to be able to get that easily here in New Zealand, but I think we'll probably see it via Mighty Ape and other local retailers of that time.
I often find that Kotobukiya is sometimes stocked in places like Sideshow Collectibles that can ship to New Zealand, so hopefully if it's not available from a local retailer, it will be available from an overseas retailer that easily ships to New Zealand, because this is a really quite a neat one.
There's a few upcoming LEGO products that are quite interesting. In addition to the other recently announced Hoth sets, there is a Defense of Hoth pack of 3 Rebel Soldier minifigs, a Clone Trooper Command Station with 3 Clone Trooper minifigs, and we'll see more about those coming up soon, I imagine, and also a mini Razor Crest at 98 pieces, set number 75321. And top of the list, I think, in terms of interesting and excitingness, is an Ahsoka Lego Brickheadz, which we've seen some imagery of and looks fantastic.
Yes, this Ahsoka is in her blue and grey final Clone Wars series look. I think this is a really neat one. I know I've seen some fan builds of different characters in the Lego Brickheadz range where people sort of create their own characters for those not yet made in the Lego line. But I think this official Ahsoka one is really, really good. Yeah,
it looks good with just the orange and white and blue colour combinations, I think. Quite an array of new Funko products which are actually available for pre-order now. All of these are currently available at Mighty Ape. We've got Jedi Luke with a hood up and a glowing lightsaber. We've got a Clone Wars Jar Jar Binks. Both of these are priced at about a $25 price point. Just recently revealed Cad Bane and Turou 360 or Toto 360. He's priced a little bit higher at $27 because he is an exclusive, but he is available here in New Zealand. And a big one, a Pop Deluxe version of the Ronin and his Astromech B556, priced at $64. And it's kind of in that black and white monochrome style that the actual episode of the Visions was in, so quite fun to actually see them really expanding into that level of material. We know that Visions has been showing up in other product lines of sorts. It's showing up in the Topps Card Trader app, for instance, quite heavily featured. Most of the main characters from that series are available in that app, but fun to see them sort of just expanding into all these other product lines. Haven't yet seen them in the standard Hasbro lines, but and I know a lot of people would actually be quite keen for that. I think the main challenge there is representing the different animation styles for each of the different characters in some sort of cohesive or sensible way, if we're going to go and put them into the standard 3.75 or Black Series 6-inch lines. But we may yet see that down the line. Local online retailer Pop Guardian has just announced that they're taking pre-orders for some new waves of Black Series action figures. Particularly exciting to see the Boba Fett Tython action figure, Fennec Shand, both from The Mandalorian, Miggs Mayfeld, Morak version, so he's in his tank trooper armor. A Jedha Patrol Stormtrooper, who's potentially one of my favorites, but the pre-order for that has already sold out. Hopefully we'll see that via other retailers as well. Bib Fortuna, Ponda Baba, Dr. Evazan, and Yavin Ceremony, Princess Leia. So it looks like Pop Guardian is one of the first local retailers to get them all up for pre-order. They've got them all priced at $40. We'll probably see those from other retailers as well locally, but if you want to get your pre-orders locked in, go to Pop Guardian and use code SWNZ5 at checkout to get an additional 5% discount on your order of Star Wars products. Finally, from New Zealand Mint, since our last podcast, a couple of new silver Star Wars coins have been released. In their Chibi coin line, joining Kylo from the sequel trilogy is a Rey Chibi coin, 2 versions, $149 standard version and a premium case, which comes numbered with the first 100 numbers of the mintage, priced at $300. So the Rey Chibi coin. The Chibi coins tend to sell out quite fast. We noticed that the Kylo Ren one stuck around just a shade longer than the original trilogy ones, and that seems to be the case for the Rey as well. So perhaps a sequel trilogy for these Chibi coins. Not quite as sought after as the original trilogy, but if you are being a completist or you want to go for those sequel trilogy characters, they are still available direct from New Zealand Mint. Also from New Zealand Mint, in the Faces of the Empire coin line, we are now up to the Snowtrooper. He is priced at $149 and he is available to purchase direct now as well. So from memory, that Snowtrooper, he's about the 5th release in that Faces of the Empire coin line. So all up, some really fun products that have been announced and products that are available locally. I'm loving that Hasbro Deluxe Boba Fett that we talked about right at the start of the product announcements. In particular, I know that we've bemoaned the price point of deluxe figures, particularly if they don't include a lot of additional components, but I can strongly see us getting any action figure that has a Temuera Morrison version of Boba Fett moving forward, and it's going to be quite fun to have all the different iterations of Tim as Boba Fett in the Black Series line in particular.
I know there's probably a few of us that are thinking about maybe getting one of these figures and putting it aside in the hopes of having Tim appear as a guest at an Armageddon in the future and getting an awesome signature across the front of a Boba Fett figure, because that would just be an amazing piece to have in your collection as a New Zealand fan. Yeah,
well, I mean, Tim just epitomizes the Kiwi involvement in Star Wars at this point in time. Such a big deal. And yeah, an autographed figure I think would be quite a neat thing to have in a collection. That's a good idea. And the window box ones of those deluxe figures work quite well for that. But that's about it for today's installment. I guess we're done doing talking. If you have any thoughts on the topics we discussed today, we're definitely keen to hear them. Leave a comment on the YouTube page or our website page for this podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you taking your time to listen to us share our passion for Star Wars. Stay tuned to our website, SWNZ.co.nz, for Star Wars news for New Zealanders and another podcast episode next week and every Tuesday. Don't forget you can jump on over to either our Facebook group or the SWNZ message boards to discuss all the latest Star Wars news with other Kiwi fans. Kia ora, kia noho haumaru, thank you for listening and stay safe.
Turou Hawaiki, may the Force be with you.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, go ahead and like the video, check out the SWNZ Podcast playlist for our other episodes, and subscribe for alerts about new episodes. See you next time.